From the southeastern corner of western North Carolina, this is Folklore. I'm your host, James Hernishin. More than 50 years ago, on Christmas Eve of 1968, as Apollo 8 rounded the far side of the moon, astronaut William Anders grabbed his Hasselblad 500 EL electric drive 70mm camera and snapped a picture of the Earth as it slipped into view. That photograph, called Earthrise, has been described as one of the most influential images ever created, changing the way we thought about our place in the universe and helping launch the modern environmental movement. But 100 years before that, a select group of artists was assigned to haul their painting gear across America to capture somewhat more close-up scenes of the natural world. Their illustrations were converted into wood and steel engravings and then published in a series of coffee table journals called Picturesque America. Those images were also hugely influential. In fact, the idea of the national park system can, at least in part, be traced to that project. Of course, the mission of preserving nature is a never-ending one, because the threats never go away. In this episode, we meet one of the modern champions of the power of art to inspire environmental protection. Scott Varn recently moved his national nonprofit organization, Preserving a Picturesque America, to Polk County, to Saluda, to be precise. What exactly his nonprofit does will take a little more explaining. I'll let Scott give the details in a minute, but the short story is he's working with today's artists to raise money to protect the places first captured by their 19th century predecessors. We talked at his new digs in Saluda, where you can find much of that art on display earlier this month. Scott Varn, welcome to Folklore.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So let's get right into discussing what this organization is all about. Although first, tell us a little bit about how you came up with the idea for Preserving a Picturesque America.
Well, I see so much of this as a gift that's been handed down to me through generations. This all started long before I was born, 150 years ago, in the 1870s. And I discovered it much later, about 15 years ago. And a lot of it comes from the gift of children who are very honest, and my own children, who I was trying to inspire to be good conservationists, good stewards of the earth, that sort of thing. And they said, "What do you do, Daddy?" And I had to take a hard look at myself. Oh, I recycle. Oh, I'm a member of the Sierra Club. What am I really doing to make a difference for conservation, for preservation, for the world we live in? And this became a gift to me to give me an opportunity to give back. So our association, our nonprofit, Preserving a Picturesque America, or I'll make it easy for you, we'll call it PAPA. It's a lot harder to say all those words every time. But PAPA was formed out of that gift of my children, saying, I need to find something to make a difference. And I can't just say, you should, I should. And this opportunity came about, I think, because I opened my mind and, my heart to looking for something that would allow me to do that.
Where were you at this time?
So I was in Asheville at the time. I still have a lot of ties to that wonderful community and the art community there. But we were raising our children, and you're thinking about some place that's so beautiful. It has so many places you can branch out to, Saluda, Brevard, all of these amazing places. You're attached a lot more to the natural world than you are, when you're living in a city. So, yeah, we were there in the Asheville area.
And what were you doing? Like, what was your business at that time?
So at that time, I had started a business so that I could be with my family a little more. I have long history in the arts, but as they relate to technology, worked with companies like Adobe and Quark and things like that. And we started a business called Harmony. And it was combining technology with sound so that we could do basically more beautiful versions of technology in the home. We would hide televisions and make them pop up when you wanted them. Home theaters. I designed my own speakers. I would take old classic radios and turn them back into living, breathing new pieces of audio. So it was something that I was trying to combine some of my skills in technology with my artistic skills. And my wife is an interior designer. So that was very good for us to be partners in this. So that was our business in Asheville. But I always knew I wanted to be connected in a different way. But, you are really trying to be a parent too. Put food on the table, pay the bills, all of that sort of thing. This emerged later because of the flexibility that I had as being a business owner. One of the great things about being a business owner is making choices of saying, you know what, it's 3:00 and my son has a soccer game. I'm going to go see that. And then I'll work at 9:00 at night.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
So I thought it'd be more flexible, but of course, being your own business owner means you never stop working. But that was a long-winded way of saying, what we were doing there in Asheville. But,
all right. Well, explain then the mission and the purpose behind Papa.
Well, I can first explain that by saying there was a mission of the original artist that worked for Picturesque America 150 years ago. So Picturesque America was a publication from Appleton Press in New York. And they sent out artists, writers, and poets all around America. And they wanted them to find simply the most picturesque places. And this was right after the Civil War. So obviously the country was torn apart. And they were literally looking for good news stories, something that wasn't dividing, but something that everyone could agree on. Now, I didn't know any of this history yet. This is just what they were doing at the time. And what happened for me and how this all began was that I was trying to get back to my artwork. When you're running a business, you are constantly taken away from things sometimes you love. So it was pretty much business and family. But my art was suffering. I wasn't doing the woodcuts and the watercolor work that I really loved. Because, you're tired. You come home, you've been running a business, maybe watch a little bit of TV and pass out, get back to work.
I think you've just described 95% of the people I know, including myself.
Well, and we understand life, and we know that sometimes you put the things that you really care about on the back burner, but they're still on that back burner. They're still simmering. They're going to get to a point where you're ready to eat. You're saying, I want that too. It needs to be part of my life. Just because it's on the back burner simmering doesn't mean you're not going to make it part of the meal. And I felt like that was not something I was enjoying anymore. So it's a very odd way of getting there, but I was looking for something to kickstart me, really inspire me again. So instead of just going back and carving wood again and trying to get some compositions, I was like, let's get motivated. So let me look at the old masters. So I started looking through different online places that were showing wood carving and wood cut, specifically my artwork medium. What are they doing to show who the masters are? Because there's a lot of people like Kitty Kolowitz that did a lot of Holocaust art that's very depressing. But I was looking for something and powerful and important work that she does. She's one of my great inspirations. And I have so many of her works. But this was something I wanted to tie to nature. So I was looking at landscape art specifically that was done as woodcuts. And every time it kept pointing to this one publication. Didn't know anything about it. But then I found one that was of the French Broad. I spent so much time on the French Broad paddling. I'm also a scoutmaster. So, taking the kids out in Pisgah National Forest or Brevard or, Polk County, that's one of the favorite things in my life as well, one of my passions. So I saw a woodcut that I knew was from the 1800s because it listed it, and it was of the French Broad. Beautiful illustration. Ordered it, got it in, paid for it in an auction. I had no idea it was actually cut out of a page of a book. Like, wait a minute, who would slice a book and sell it to me? I felt like I was conspirator to a crime. You don't take an old, classic book and cut it up. But it was kind of serendipitous because on the back side of it, it said the name, Picturesque America, but the writing from the author that had come to the French Broad was in awe of this region because it wasn't developed yet in 1870. It wasn't industrialized. The railroad had not come. So they kept talking about how untouched and how spoiled and how wonderful Western North Carolina was. And they kept kind of hinting, we wonder when the inevitable will happen. When will this become spoiled? It's now unspoiled, but we know industrialization, almost like they're expecting it to be ruined. But they were taking it at the time and saying, I want to describe it. We want to do the artwork. We want to capture it before it is lost.
It's kind of like a biological research expedition collecting baseline data before they find out what the effects of human activities are.
Absolutely. From a scientific standpoint, I've known a lot of people that have now read Picturesque America getting clues as that baseline because they were looking at it as artists, but there is a lot of data in there that people have used. So their perspective, the way they looked at this amazing place that I call home, and to see that some of those places weren't lost yet, really got my wheels turning. So immediately, of course, I had to go to that place that was originally featured. What happened to be Lover's Leap in Hot Springs, North Carolina. Now, of course, in the day, they called it Warm Springs. Apparently, marketing had not got a hold of Warm Springs yet. But I knew the place because it's on the Appalachian Trail, which I'm very fond of. I haven't finished the Appalachian Trail, but I've hiked a good bit of it and have a lot of dear friends that have. And so went back to visit that spot and compared it to the original engraving. And that, of course, gave me the idea of saying, could we do this more? Are there more pictures like? Well, I discovered quickly that there's almost 1,000 pieces of artwork in the series that is Picturesque America. I had no idea. So start digging deeper. There was a wonderful bookstore, now they're unfortunately only online, called the Captain's Bookshelf. And that's in Asheville, or was, unfortunately. But they were friends of mine in Montford. I lived in that community, old homes there. And so they told me you should come by the bookstore and see if we've got a copy. Sure enough, they did. But I kept showing up because I didn't have the money, kind of treating it like a library, going there and flipping through the pages. And they very nicely kind of said, eventually you might need to actually buy the book, rather than just coming here and looking through it. They gave me a wonderful friend discount, and that became the first copy that I ever had of Picturesque America. And now it's the deep dive, what is this all about?
And so you at some point said, okay, let's reproduce this process.
Essentially, curiosity, of course, gets a hold of you. And you're going, can I find all these places? Because it's not just Western North Carolina. There's places in Boston. There's places in Maine, Colorado. And of course, they had Yosemite in there. And Yosemite, after all the places I've been, still been a place I've never been to. There's no shortage of people saying, you have to go to Yosemite. Oh my God, this is unbelievable. But still had never been. Well, short version is I had an opportunity because I was being asked for input on new speakers that were being built. And they happened to be, I'm looking on the map of where they want me to go to this conference. And it's like an hour and a half, 2 hours from Yosemite. Well, we got to go and just have fun with it. So my wife and I went together. I did the conference, and immediately afterwards we went to Yosemite, carrying the 28-pound book with me, one of the single volumes of Picturesque America. It was normally bound into multiple volumes, but this is the volume that had Yosemite in it. And so I'm carrying around, essentials, water, food, basics, and the giant book with me, trying to find those spots. We said, let's just see if we can do this.
28 pounds
of book.
I've gone hiking where my backpack weighs about 28 pounds.
Right. And so carrying around 2 volumes of Picturesque America is not the smartest way. We all know if you ever backpack that ounces equal pounds, pounds equal pain. And I was carrying around a lot of pain for that one, but it was absolutely worth it. And I also feel like, and to this day, we still carry copies of the book with us when we do Discovery, because it feels like a homecoming, bringing back what started it all back to the place where it was created. Now, it's not the original artwork, but it is the original engravings, and so it's kind of sentimental. But as you might have guessed, I'm quite a sentimental fellow, and I fall into those traps very easily.
So describe the process involved in, a specific piece of art that you commission for this project.
So how it would work, let's use Yosemite as an example. So first, you're looking and studying the artwork, but you can't just do that because the writers had such an influence in there of where they went. So we are looking for the cathedral spires in Yosemite. And they're just amazingly majestic in the book. But as we all know, nothing beats reality. So they're not hard to find. They're still named cathedral spires. Look on any map of Yosemite, there they are. But we're not looking for just them in existence. We're looking for the exact place where the artist was 150 years ago. Where did he sit and do his rendering that became the engraving that went into the book? So finding that is a little bit different because obviously you got 360 degree on the compass to get around to be looking in the same direction. And things can change in 150 years. Now, this, of course, is a national park, thank God. And so we can ask the rangers and everything else. But they're not used to it. They're like, well, it's right there. Just go down the road to it. Well, trying to find that spot became very challenging. Not just that there were trees in the way or there might not be access. We're trying to get the perspective of the other mountains around it. Where is it in the entire valley? Because the Yosemite Valley is an amazing, picturesque place, but there was a place that he went, and why? So one thing that I'll kind of jump ahead to is that I know other people have tried to find these places from these books before. I'm not the first one, but they all gave up pretty easily because they all said it's fabrications, embellishment by the artist, artistic license. Well, what I found out is a lot of these artists were trying to be almost scientific about it. They were trying to document. They weren't trying to embellish something that's amazing on its own. It doesn't require embellishment. It is outstanding. So when I go there and trying to find the angle and the pitch and, what all the perspective aspects of it can be a challenge. So in this particular case, we read through the text because we weren't finding it. And then we realized they were walking down the Merced River and stopped for a picnic. And that's where the artist painted. It was all through the implied text. So we start following the Merced River. And we find and there's the trees up or everywhere, there's rocks everywhere, there's growth that we don't know if it was there or not. But sure enough, there's this one bend where all the sand keeps washing up. And it would be a nice place for a picnic. We back up, we go a little bit there, we look up, and sure enough, every single bit of the perspective lines up, where it is on the other mountains and everything else. And this was a very amazing moment. It was one of those connections to the past that you just, vocally, I can't describe because it's a physical transcendence between the past and the present and knowing that you were in the same place the artist was. And so at that moment, we open the book and have this kind of celebratory, we actually found it. And then we knew that we could do this again. This is a repeatable process.
And so what happens next?
So next, normally, I do a simple ink wash. Ink wash meaning that it was, if you're doing watercolors or ink washes, there's less materials to bring. A lot of people consider oil the landscaping medium. That's the medium. Well, at the time, they could only reproduce things through woodcuts, wood engravings, steel engravings, the printmaking method, because that's how you reproduce books. You could take a photo, but it was a giant platform camera, right? How are you going to drag that through the woods and get it to these places?
That's even worse than 28-pound book.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a 50-pound, glass, and you got to carry all that in emulsions. Please, can't even imagine photography in those days. So the artist, the best thing they could do was carry something lightweight. And normally it would be ink, get water out of the nearby stream, and paper and brushes. So I tried to do it in the same way the original artist did. I do carry something very lightweight, much more lightweight than the books. So I have my little kit. and I do a perspective drawing there. Now, I'm probably going to do a much more finished piece later, but one of the things people don't understand artistically is that if you paint specifically from a photograph, all the decisions have been made. Everything is now flattened into 2D. When you do a illustration live, you make choices of how far away that tree is, where the limb is. Maybe a limb is covering the top part of cathedral spires. Well, you dip down a little bit, to see a little bit more of it. If it's just a photograph, those leaves are already blocking it. Your decisions have been made, you must include it. So I at least do a perspective drawing, because I will say some of these places we spent days looking for, and we finally find it right around dusk. And we're like, oh no, I don't have time to spend several hours doing a painting. So what I'll do is a quick graphite illustration just to get my perspective right and take tons of photos and zoom in and get the details. Details can be added later. Perspective can be best represented on the spot there. So that would be the next step. And then it's kind of check that box, saying, okay, there were 15 illustrations in Yosemite. Have we found them all? And it's funny, I guess some of my also love of science as well. We document how much has it changed? How much embellishment did the artist use, if any? Is this place protected? Is it need of protection? Is it a state park, national park? So we accumulate a lot of data when we're there, usually on the flight or drive home. But, that's sort of the documentation aspect. And then the next step is to, once we found all of the places from a serial. So if I can describe, it was originally released as a serial. And those serials would be bound into the volumes. So you got it kind of like National Geographic, before National Geographic existed, right? And so we tried to look at each one as a serial. So we just tried to get all of the artwork in a single serial and then, say, hooray, that sort of thing.
And how does that get transformed into a piece of art?
So the next step is we really decided early on that this couldn't be exclusively my project. My trail name is Doc. So it's not Doc's story. It's not my story. This is a story of how conservation happened in America because of this publication. This publication changed the way people thought about the natural world and the historic world, because they weren't really looking at it as something to be protected. As Europeans, settlers here, in most cases, they were looking at something to be exploited. This is resources for us to extract. But we're finally getting to the point where we're losing this. The inexhaustible resources in America is the way it was described over and over and over. And now we're exhausting them, and we're polluting them, and we're destroying them. That realization was coming about, but these artists and poets and writers were given nature a voice. And their way of looking at it made all of the Americans, because this was only 50 cents for you to get a copy. So it was affordable. It was art that was accessible to everyone. And if you didn't have it, you knew someone that did. So this was a very commonly read one. So it changed the way Americans looked at it. So to answer your question, going down that tangent tree, I didn't want it to be just about my discovery. I wanted to bring other people along for this. And frankly, if I'm going to recreate these, I have almost 1,000 pieces of art to recreate. I need to bring in more people. And then we thought about, we said, it should be the people that live there. It should be the people that care about their own backyard. So we wanted to invite artists back. So if I leave Yosemite for the time being and go back to Western North Carolina, it made sense to really start with our home and the artists that I already knew. So I started inviting, saying, okay, I know where this place is in Lover's Leap. Look at this engraving. And they're like, whoa, this thing's crazy. How did they get the detail? And we start bantering with the other artists. And I said, would you like to go back there? Yeah. Can you show me where that is? And the enthusiasm was just instantaneous. And so based off of their enthusiasm back to me, I started bringing other artists to these places. And they wanted to recreate it. And they wanted to line up and get everything in exactly the right spot where the original artist was. So I guess to answer your question, I feel like it's not just something for me, it's something that had to be shared. And now our organization essentially takes all of those other artists from all of the places around the country. And then we have shows specifically to raise money to protect the places that they just illustrated.
Well, it took a while, but you have told an amazing story about the underappreciated connection between art and nature. I don't think we need to talk any more about the specifics of that because you've given us an amazing amount of detail. You're obviously an accomplished storyteller. I mean, you've told this story before.
I have told this tale before.
Well, yeah, and so I appreciate that. But let's talk now about this more consequential decision in the context of this podcast is, why are you here? Why set up shop in Polk County and Saluda in particular?
Well, I'll try to shorten that long story.
The podcast has no. We can talk for as long as you want.
Good, you can edit it down. Well, I have a connection to the wonderful town of Saluda. So many South Carolinians. I was originally born there in the land of the pine and sand, and not a lot of biological diversity where I was. So for me, heaven was escaping to come up to the mountains of Western North Carolina. And as a lot of people in Polk County know, so many Charlestonians and people from Columbia and Greenville have made this their getaway for, at least 150, 200 years, right? Because they want to escape the heat. They want to escape the mosquitoes. And so I have been coming here for those reasons. And as a scout, before as a scoutmaster, coming here to come to Pisgah, et cetera. So I've been in love with this area for a very long time. But to your point, why not a heavy metropolis?
Well, most national nonprofit organizations do tend to set up shop in a place like New York or Chicago or Los Angeles or San Francisco because there's already a nexus of other nonprofits and like-minded folks. Now, communications technology has made it less important to be physically present, but I'm just curious about your motivations for saying, we can do our work on a national scale, but we can do it from Saluda.
I think you hit part of the nail on the head. Thank God for the amount of technology. Maybe 20 years ago, I would have said, no one's ever going to come by here. There's not enough traffic. Why would anyone want to come here? Sort of thing. But now with technology, obviously, we can reach out and communicate with other nonprofits and other people very easily. But I think there's something more important about being in a beautiful, calming place that intrigues people, not just because it's beautiful, but because they don't know why they're relaxing. There's something about Polk County, there's something about Saluda that draws people because not just of its beauty, but because of its pace. They're slowing down, and it gives people an opportunity to think about things that they may not have done before. And so I would rather be in a place where people are relaxed and might be willing to listen to a story and to take the time to breathe and breathe in these amazing pieces of artwork, to take the time to listen to why we are doing this rather than rushing in and out. I think if you're in a bigger metropolis, you almost have to have a destination. You're coming into the art gallery because we have to find something that matches our couch. And we need to get it. And does it fit in the car? And can we move? There's an agenda. Boom, 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 boom. But part of it is, I want to be in a place that I want to be in. I think I can have a more calming presence when I speak to this. I want to invite people here to be part of this wonderful environment and then take in a larger message.
What about the still relatively off the beaten track? I mean, we're only feet from the interstate.
And really, the track's right there.
And the tracks are right there. But I mean, if you want to expose people to art, the physical works of art that you have in your gallery here, it would be easier just to be maybe just in Asheville.
Well, we were in Asheville. And we decided to be here for a couple of reasons. Some of them are, personal. We actually live on Pearsons Falls Road. So we can now walk to the gallery. That's kind of nice. So on a personal level, that's good. But when people came to see our artwork in Asheville, I do love the town, but they're distracted by so many other things, and we're surrounded by so much other artwork. I see when people come into the gallery now, they kind of ease in and they stay and they take it in. They don't have a lot of other competition of things they're just taking up their mind share, I guess. I think they're already in a better space when they're here. And one thing I do like about Saluda as well is that it is a arts community. A lot of artists have been drawn here, and a lot of people know that now. It's growing as there's a lot of eclectic artists here doing different types of artwork, which is also important because art feeds off of art. You come here, you may be coming here for beautiful pottery, but while you're here, you see some amazing jewelry, and then you see some paintings that you like.
Well, this is something I noticed. The Arts Festival has basically eclipsed Coondog Day. I mean, as the biggest draw. Mm-hmm. And in part, that's because Coondog Day was getting out of hand, and we scaled it back to be more local focused.
Sure.
But the Arts Festival is quite the event.
It is.
And we have people like Jim Carson, who's just down the street here, and lots of other artists and potters and jewelry makers in town. And I don't think Saluda was always that way.
No, I would think that maybe this is just a fabrication in my own mind, but I certainly can't imagine artists escaping to Saluda to get out of their metropolis and do some artwork, or just find their muse again, or just breathe and then go back, and attack whatever they needed to in their life. So I would say there's always been a creative, open-minded aspect to Saluda that's drawn people. But you're right. I think only in the past maybe 15, 20 years has it grown even more as an arts community. And I think it's partially because the artists want to be here, but it's because people that do appreciate art do come through Saluda.
There's an interesting contradiction, though, and I've heard in the last half hour we've been talking, between the slow pace of Saluda, the slow pace of art, because it takes time to produce great art, and the sense of urgency. I mean, we're losing nature all the time.
I'm glad you brought that up because when we started this, it was about 15 years ago. And although climate change was obviously well known, maybe not as much on the forefront as it is today, as we're seeing actual consequences of climate change. We can talk about the science all day, but when people start seeing the reality of it, it starts to hit home. And I do agree with you. There's a certain amount of urgency of what is being lost. Florida, I'm not trying to beat up Florida, but the developers that have...
Feel free to beat up on Florida.
Especially people in West North Carolina. It's like, leave your money here, go back home. But and all the halfbacks, as they say, that move from, up north to Florida and then halfway back. There's a lot of people that have come here for that. But, I feel the urgency that I didn't feel years ago. And we've been doing this project for a while. And it became something that was originally beautiful. And now I'm constantly talking about what can you do? Because what Papa has done for artists is been able to give them a vehicle to give back to their muse. Meaning they're inspired by nature, they paint nature, but they feel like they're not giving anything back to it other than selling something beautiful that depicts that space. So now in our particular case, the gallery fee, if a fine artist is in a gallery, there's a fee that goes to the gallery, obviously, for hosting and selling their work. They make some money and the gallery makes their money. In our particular case, since we're a nonprofit, the money that would go to the gallery goes specifically to protect that place. So if you're painting, for instance, we're talking about Lover's Leap that goes in Hot Springs. Well, it's now on the Appalachian Trail. So the Appalachian Trail Conservancy has to maintain those trails of this wonderful, amazing experience of the AT. So the money that you earned that would normally go to the gallery now goes to the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. Or Carolina,
Conserving Carolina?
they're definitely one of ours. And then there's Carolina Mountain Club, who does actual trail maintenance. They've been one of our beneficiaries. So these people are doing the hard work. We realized in our own ambition, it's like, what can we do? We need to do something, but we can't do everything as artists. I mean, sure, we can occasionally pull tires out of the river. We can go on cleanup days. We can work a shovel, but there's a lot of people that got boots on the ground, like Riverlink and Greenworks and Mountain True, who are measuring the E. coli levels in our streams. These are the scientists that are making a difference. I don't need to go buy scientific equipment, hire people to do. No. There are good people already doing this work. So now it gives the artist a way to make some money on their artwork, but to know that that gallery fee is going to help those scientists. They're out there, boots on the ground, doing the good work that is so desperately needed right now, because we all want to go kayaking down the Green River. We all want to get on the French Broad, but we don't know what goes into keeping that clean. And that is a sense of urgency. And so many places are being lost. I think you alluded to this before when we were talking about Florida. There's a lot of people coming up and developing because they've overdeveloped down there. And like, there's an opportunity to make money here. And they're not thinking about the consequences of the development. They're not thinking about the community. They're not thinking about the erosion control that they're not doing, that's making all of our streams and our rivers brown, because they're just taking the topsoil away and cut every tree away and not doing anything with them, sending them to the landfill and not doing any erosion control. There's so many things that education is important about that.
I'm just really fascinated by the idea of being able to buy a piece of art and know not just that the money is going to support some organization. I mean, it's like, the Red Cross asks for your money, and they'll put it wherever they think they need at this particular time, whatever disaster is happening. But in your case, you're saying, okay, you can purchase a piece of art, and the very scene in that art is going to be protected,
That's
or at
right.
least be more protected because of the money you've just put up.
Right.
Yeah.
Like we even, of course, here we think about beautiful Pearson's Falls, and the Garden Club. We have to look at, if we started painting that, then, okay, that would go to help them keep that wonderful trail up, and keep it going. But I will say that our first focus is the original almost 1,000 places, because we have to have a device, frankly. I'm trying to get to all of them before I die. We're 311 in so far, that we've actually been there and found that spot.
So it's after 15 years?
Right. Yeah,
Oh.
we need to accelerate.
Right.
I will say in the first 10 years especially, it was done while I was still working. I ended up selling my business to my employees so that I could do this 100% and focus every bit of my time on the nonprofit. But for the first 10 years of it, it was every family vacation. Sometimes we would take longer trips and say, okay. And we actually homeschooled our kids for a year, because we said, we can't really do this with that schedule. So we may be out in Colorado, and we were just climbing, these peaks, trying to find these spots, and then giving them math homework. And I said, give me your math books back. Why? Get your boots on. We got to hit this trail. They didn't mind that too much. And, I have wonderful kids who embrace the whole project and have become artists themselves, which I love. And they become very conscious of not just the natural world, but just about making a difference. And so I would say, regardless of what we're even doing now, on a personal level, it was very important to show my own children that you can't have fear about what you might lose. You have to be thinking about what you might gain. The sacrifices that we make are a lot smaller than we think. It's the fear that keeps us from doing the big things. And so, if there's any message, I kind of thought about this a little bit. It's not so much about our project. I know in my heart that we're doing good work and these artists are contributing and making a difference. But I want people to know more than anything is that there's an opportunity for all of us to step up in some way. It's more than even joining the Sierra Club. It's volunteering with your kids to go out with Greenworks and clean up a river. All of these small bits add up. And we feel helpless. But it's all the drops in a bucket that fill it. You know, it's all the raindrops that fill the ocean. And make these creeks flow. We have to do something. You can't just say, I can't do enough. Climate change is too huge. The loss of this land is too much. If you're constantly engaging in your voting, in your participation in these groups, in the cleanups, anything, just if all of us did a little bit, you'd be amazed at how much that river would rise.
Well, it sounds like you're trying to do more than just a little bit, but good luck with the other 680 odd sites you have to track down. But thanks so much for spending some time with me.
Thank you.
I think this is just a great story, and I'm going to try my best to make sure as many people as possible hear it.
Thank you, because they can all do their part. And I will say one last thing, if I may, is that it also is beyond art. Some people come in here and they really love the story of what we're doing, but they're at a loss because maybe they're not art collectors. And our art ranges from $100 to $8,000, depending on the quality and the artists themselves and their fame. But, you can also just donate to people that are doing that work. Don't see something that inspires you and do nothing. If nothing else, if people come into our gallery and become inspired, please leave and do something.
Okay, well, we're going to end with don't do nothing. I think that is great advice. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of Folklore. As always, you can reach me with feedback and suggestions for guests at jamesh@folklore.com. Thanks for listening.